All right, so State Street Corporation and their latest 10K reports, huh? We're really going for it with this deep dive.
Yeah, and these filings from the past few years, 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023, well, they tell us way more than just the numbers.
It's true. This is a global financial giant, and we're going to see how they're dealing with a world that's changing really fast.
You know, what I find really interesting is how these reports kind of give us a sneak peek into what's coming next in finance. We're not just talking about State Street here, but the trends that are shaping the entire industry, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so just in case anyone isn't familiar, State Street Corporation, or STT as they say on Wall Street, they're like massive. We're talking trillions of dollars in assets, like everything from your pension funds to those ETFs you might have.
They're the ones working behind the scenes, making sure everything in finance runs smoothly.
Exactly. But here's the catch. They're not just a bunch of people in suits shuffling papers around. Remember 2022 and the market was like a roller coaster and interest rates were all over the place?
Oh, yeah.
State Street actually somehow used that to their advantage.
Yeah. They actually explain in their 2022 report how they restructured their available-for-sale securities portfolio, and that actually helped them increase their net interest income.
Wow.
Despite all that volatility. It's pretty impressive.
That is some really slick maneuvering, financially speaking. It's a perfect example of how they're actively managing risk.
Absolutely.
Speaking of risk, though, being labeled a systemically important financial institution that has to come with its own set of, unique challenges.
Yeah, it's a whole different ballgame. They've got to comply with all these much stricter regulations, like Basel III, you know. It's a framework that basically dictates how much capital they need to hold to be able to, weather a financial storm.
And don't forget those stress tests they have to go through.
Oh, man, those are something else. Basically, regulators create all these hypothetical worst-case scenarios, you know, like a global recession or a stock market crash.
Right.
And they use those to see if State Street can handle the heat. Can their financial house withstand that kind of pressure?
It really makes you realize just how much depends on them, right? But okay, let's shift gears for a second, away from all this doom and gloom. Let's talk tech. State Street definitely isn't just sitting on the sidelines in this age of fintech.
Oh, absolutely not. Their 2023 report highlights just how much they're investing in things like AI and machine learning, particularly in their risk management systems. It's pretty wild when you think about it, like having a crystal ball that can predict financial risk.
Seriously.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And it's not all just numbers and algorithms either.
Yeah.
They're also really focused on something else that's pretty crucial, making their workforce more inclusive.
Yes. You can see from their reports over the past few years, there's a clear commitment there to increase representation of women and BIPOC employees at every level.
That's awesome.
They're even acknowledging both the progress they've made, but also the areas where they're still working to improve. That's in their latest report.
It's really refreshing to see, a financial giant actually prioritizing people and values alongside, profits, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think it shows that they get the bigger picture, you know? They're not just focused on short-term gains, but on building something that lasts, both as a business and as a responsible member of the global community. But doing that means they've got to face a whole new world of challenges.
So, picking up where we left off, let's dive into those challenges State Street faces as they try to achieve, their long-term goals, like their global expansion plans, for instance. Those are no walk in the park, right?
Oh, for sure. Their reports show they're really pushing to grow their presence outside of the U.S., especially in Asia and Europe.
Right.
But as you might imagine, that's not exactly easy.
No.
It's definitely not as simple as just, setting up shop and expecting clients to flock in.
Right. So how are they actually trying to make it work? How are they breaking into those markets?
Well, their 2021 report actually talks about how they're taking this kind of a multi-pronged approach, right? It's like strategic acquisitions. They're buying local companies to get that insider knowledge.
Makes sense.
They're also forming these partnerships, which helps them navigate all those tricky regulations in new places.
It's got to be a lot to figure out.
Right. And then on top of that, they're leveraging, their global scale and their tech to offer services that are actually competitive.
So they're finding that balance.
Yeah, exactly.
Between respecting how each region does things differently and also playing to their strength, since they're this global powerhouse.
Totally. And speaking of playing to their strengths, we got to talk about State Street Alpha for a minute.
Oh, yeah.
This is a perfect example of how they're using tech to get a real competitive edge,
Right. For anyone who missed it, Alpha is basically their attempt to create an operating system for the entire investment world. It's all about making those back office processes we talked about earlier way more streamlined.
Totally. They're putting their money on this idea that in the future, financial institutions are going to need this more integrated, automated way of doing things like data management, trading, custody, all of it.
And sounds like it's starting to pay off for them.
It seems like it.
Their 2023 report showed a huge jump in the number of clients actually using Alpha.
It's impressive, but let's be real, a tech undertaking this big, it comes with some serious risks.
Of course.
Oh, yeah. They even admit in the report that it's a challenge.
Yeah.
Integrating all this new technology, managing these complex client relationships, especially as they're trying to move everyone onto this new platform.
Right, right.
And of course, the biggest challenge of all. Staying ahead of the game in the world of fintech. It moves so fast.
It's like trying to hit a moving target.
Totally.
Yeah.
So with all this expansion happening, all this tech development, and the increasing pressure from regulations, how is State Street actually doing financially?
Right. What's the bottom line?
Well, their 10K reports show a company that's making a profit, but they're definitely facing some headwinds too. Take their net interest margin, for example. That's the difference between what they're earning on loans and investments and what they're paying out in interest. It's been, well, kind of all over the place the past few years.
Yeah, their 2022 report mentioned that those rising interest rates, at first they actually caused some losses in their available for sale portfolio. But in the end, it actually helped them increase their net interest income. Sounds like a roller coaster ride.
Totally a roller coaster.
So it's not all sunshine and rainbows then, I guess.
Definitely not. They've had to adapt really quickly to the changing interest rate environment, And their 2023 filing, it even mentions this thing called rising deposit betas as a challenge.
Okay, and for those of us who haven't spent all day reading financial reports, what exactly does that mean?
Basically, it means they're having to offer higher interest rates to attract and hold on to deposits.
Oh, I see.
Which can really cut into their profits.
So managing those interest rate swings, it's a big deal for them. But interest rates aside, what else is affecting their bottom line?
Well, like any large company, they've got to keep a close eye on expenses, right? A huge one is compensation and benefits for their employees. It takes a lot to attract and keep top talent, especially in such a competitive industry.
Totally.
Then you've got the cost of, staying ahead in the tech race. We already touched on that a bit. And then, of course, there's cybersecurity. It's huge these days.
Yeah. In their 2022 report, they actually called it an arms race. Yep. They have to invest more and more just to stay one step ahead of, the bad guys.
That's right.
It makes sense, though, considering how much sensitive financial data they're handling.
For sure. But it's easy to forget sometimes with all these numbers and market trends and everything that we're actually talking about a company made up of people.
That's a good point.
And that's something State Street seems to really get, especially when it comes to their commitment to diversity and inclusion.
Absolutely. Their latest report highlighted some pretty impressive progress in, increasing representation at all levels of the company.
Mm-hmm.
But they also admitted that, they still got some work to do. I think that kind of honesty is refreshing, don't you think?
I do. It shows real transparency, a willingness to be held accountable.
Yeah, exactly.
It feels like a real shift is happening in the financial industry. People are finally starting to realize that diversity and inclusion, those aren't just buzzwords, They're essential for long-term success.
Absolutely. It sounds like they're really putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's something investors and clients really notice,
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, who wouldn't want to work with a company that's not only doing well financially, but is also trying to make the world a better place?
Couldn't agree more. But speaking of making the world a better place, there's another side to State Street's business that we should talk about. Their whole approach to sustainability.
Definitely.
We're going to unpack that and a few other key themes in the final part of our deep dive. All right, welcome back. We're on the final stretch of our State Street deep dive.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
We talked global ambitions, tech investments, and of course their financials.
It's amazing how they're managing everything.
Right. Trying to stay ahead of the curve in this crazy complex and constantly changing landscape. So for this last part, let's zoom in on a few more key themes that popped up in their 10K reports.
Okay.
We've got things like sustainability, we touched on that a little before, and then risk management.
Right.
And this whole concept of corporate governance.
Now, I know those might not sound like the most thrilling topics in the world of finance.
Maybe not.
But trust me, they're really important if we're going to understand the bigger picture of how State Street actually operates.
Absolutely. So let's start with sustainability.
Yeah.
It's one thing for a company to say they're I don't know, reducing their carbon footprint
Right.
or promoting responsible investing and all that. But what's State Street actually doing?
Yeah, well, the recent reports, they actually give us some concrete examples.
Okay, like what?
Well, they've set these really ambitious goals for cutting down their own carbon emissions. For one, they're putting money into renewable energy.
Nice.
And probably the most interesting thing is they're really engaging with the companies they invest in about ESG issues.
Oh, wow. So they're not just looking at the, financial bottom line. They're thinking about the environmental and social impact, too.
Exactly. They're using their position as this huge investor
Yeah.
to try and encourage more sustainable business practices everywhere.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's not just because it's the right thing to do either. They see it as a smart move for the long run,
That's
for business.
It makes sense. The world's changing. Investor priorities are changing. If companies ignore sustainability, well, they're going to get left behind.
Exactly. Okay, now let's switch gears to something maybe a little less uplifting, but just as important. Risk management. State Street is dealing with risks on a whole other level.
No kidding.
We're talking about stuff most of us can't even imagine. Market crashes, cyber attacks, natural disasters, even just regulations changing. It's a lot.
That's a lot to keep track of.
Oh, absolutely. But their 10K reports, they actually give us this really interesting look into how they manage all that risk.
Oh, okay.
They've got entire teams whose whole job is just to identify, assess, and then hopefully mitigate all these potential problems
Wow.
across every part of their business.
They even mentioned, I think it was their 2022 report, these things called stress tests, which honestly, just the name stresses me out.
Yeah, those are intense. Basically, regulators force them to run these simulations of all kinds of worst-case scenarios.
Like what?
I'm talking global pandemic, another stock market crash, anything you can imagine to see if they could handle it.
So it's like a financial pressure cooker.
Yeah, and they have to come up with these really detailed capital plans to prove that they've got enough in the bank to absorb any potential losses without bringing the whole system down with them.
Because we're being real,
Yep.
if a company the size of State Street goes down,
Oh, yeah.
it's not just them. It's going to impact everyone.
It would be a domino effect.
Exactly.
Global economy would feel it.
Exactly.
It's scary when you think about it, which is why what they're doing is so important.
It's true.
And all their risk management processes are absolutely crucial.
Totally crucial.
And speaking of crucial processes, we've got to talk about corporate governance.
Okay, now, for those of us who don't speak fluent finance, what exactly are we talking about when we say corporate governance?
So basically, it's the set of rules, practices, procedures, everything that determines how a company is run. Who's in control, how decisions are made, that kind of thing. Think of it like their operating system, making sure everything's running smoothly, ethically, and transparently.
So it's not just about making money. It's about making money the right way.
Exactly. And State Street's reports highlight a few key parts of their approach.
Okay, like what?
Well, their board of directors, for example, they're super important.
Okay.
They're the ones overseeing management, setting the strategic direction. They're like the captains steering the ship.
I like that, yeah.
And then there's the audit committee. They keep an eye on all the financial reporting, make sure everything is, by the books.
Right, gotta have that.
And of course, they have a code of conduct.
Of course.
Every employee has to follow it.
Makes sense.
It's all about creating this culture of accountability, integrity, which is so important for building trust.
Definitely.
Trust with investors, with clients, with the public, everyone.
It sounds like they're really trying to, cover all their bases.
They are.
Not just managing risk, but also making sure that, ethically, they're doing things the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think makes these 10K reports so fascinating.
Yeah.
We get this peek behind the curtain of this financial giant. And it's not just numbers, it's their values, their principles. That's the really interesting part.
Well said.
It's a glimpse into their decision-making process.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into State Street Corporation, what would you say is the key takeaway for our listeners?
I think it's this. State Street is at a crossroads. They're dealing with what everyone in finance is dealing with right now,
It's a crazy time.
It is. Technological disruption, regulations are changing, there's this huge demand for sustainability, social responsibility, it's a lot. How they handle all that is going to decide not just their own success,
Right.
but maybe the future of finance in general.
Wow.
That's how big this is.
That's a lot of responsibility.
It is, but they seem to be taking it seriously, which is good.
It really seems like it.
That's what makes them so fascinating to follow,
They're a fascinating case study, for sure.
So to everyone listening, keep an eye on State Street. This is definitely not the end of their story.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into State Street Corporation. We hope you learned something new, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.